Try to close your eyes and imagine. You are standing in the middle of a vast square in Thebes, the dazzling capital of ancient Egypt more than 3,000 years ago. The afternoon was waning, and the fiery sunset dyed the colossal stone walls of the Karnak temple golden. Wind from the desert blew in, carrying swirling dust, forcing the thousands of people gathered there to squint. In the midst of that majestic space, all eyes were fixed on one man. The Pharaoh, the king whom the people believed to be the incarnation of the god Rio on earth, appeared on the highest step. He wore a pristine white robe and the double crown, a symbol of the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. But what made the entire crowd tremble and fall to their knees was not the crown or the golden scepter, but the object he held in his hand. A black, glossy stone, fitting perfectly in his palm. In an instant, it began to glow a light that came not from the sun, nor from torches or embers. It was a white, cold, yet enchanting light that shone directly into the faces of the crowd. A roar went up. The light of Ra. This is the eternal flame, a sign that the gods have chosen him. The Pharaoh held the phone high, gently swiping a finger across its surface. The black stone immediately shone brighter, then emitted a strange sound, short, concise, rhythmic melodies. To us, it would just be the sound of a ringtone. But to the people of ancient Egypt, this was a call from the heavens. The crowd held its breath. When the Pharaoh pressed the object to his ear and nodded, they believed he was communing directly with the god Rhea. Every word the Pharaoh spoke from that moment on was no longer the command of a man, but the oracle of a deity. The elderly trembled, pressing their hands to the ground in prayer. Children hid behind their parents, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. The priests prostrated themselves, chanting, "This is a sacred relic. This is the voice of Ra." With a single simple gesture answering a call, the Pharaoh had etched into the minds of thousands the belief that he possessed supernatural power. And that belief, when planted in a society that regarded the Pharaoh as a living god, would quickly become the solid foundation for absolute power. That night, throughout Thebes, people whispered tales of the Pharaoh's glowing stone. They wove all sorts of stories, that the Pharaoh could see the future just by looking at it, that when the sound rang out, Rhea was calling down to instruct mankind, that any who defied the Pharaoh would have their soul swallowed by this black stone. To you and me, people of the 21st century, it all sounds ridiculous, because we understand it's just a smartphone, something anyone might carry in their pocket. But put yourself in the shoes of the ancient Egyptians, a world without electricity, without radio waves, without technology. In that context, every minor function like the screen's light, the sound of a ringtone, or a voice emanating from a tiny speaker was a supernatural miracle beyond imagination. And it was this very difference that gave the Pharaoh a colossal advantage, transforming the ordinary of our time into the miraculous of theirs. From that day on, the people no longer called the phone the Black Stone. They reverently gave it a new name, the voice of Rhea. Only the Pharaoh was permitted to touch it. Only the Pharaoh could make it glow and produce sound. To the people, this was not just a treasure, but living proof that the Pharaoh was truly the son of a god. But could such a seemingly small tool change an entire civilization? How could its ordinary functions be enough to help the Pharaoh consolidate his power, even to deceive the entire mighty Egyptian empire? That story we will continue to explore in the next part. Ever since the glowing stone appeared, the Egyptian royal palace was shrouded in an unprecedented air of mystique. Every official, priest, and guard looked at the small object in the Pharaoh's hand with fear and reverence. No one dared to ask questions, because simply, if it was the voice of Ra, who would have the audacity to doubt it? The Pharaoh understood this better than anyone. He knew that true power came not from soldiers or gold, but from the absolute belief of the people. And to reinforce that belief, he began to exploit every seemingly trivial function of the phone, turning them into miracles that made all of Egypt bow down. 1. The alarm, the power to know the dawn. Every morning, before the sun rose over the desert, the alarm would ring out in the silence. To us, it's just a familiar clock sound. But to the Egyptian officials, that sound was nothing less than the call of Ra, informing the pharaoh that a new day was about to begin. No one in the court could understand why the pharaoh always woke up at the precise moment the sun appeared on the horizon. They believed he had the ability to hear the footsteps of Ra as he guided the sun across the sky. The simple truth, the pharaoh just set an alarm. But in the eyes of the people, he had become the only one with a direct link to the sun god. And from then on, every decision he made in the morning, no matter how routine, was considered divine will too. Flashlight, the flame of Ra during a religious ceremony at the Luxor temple. As darkness fell and hundreds of torches were extinguished by the desert wind, the pharaoh suddenly raised his hand. From the phone, a column of white light erupted, brighter and more powerful than any flame the people had ever seen. The crowd was terrified, then fell to their knees in unison. To them, this was the eternal flame of Ra, a fire that never went out, that illuminated the darkness and drove away evil spirits. From that day on, whenever a criminal was brought to justice, the pharaoh would simply turn on the flashlight and shine it in the person's face. The people believed that the light seared the soul and sealed their guilt forever. In reality, it only blinded the culprit, who would fall to their knees in fear. But that fear only made the miracle more convincing. 3. The camera, the soul-trapping machine. Once, an official was accused of corruption, but he vehemently denied it. The pharaoh took out his phone, held it up in front of the man, and took a picture. A click! Sound was heard, and the official's face appeared on the screen. The crowd erupted in terror. The pharaoh has trapped his soul in the stone. From then on, no one dared to oppose the pharaoh, for with a single touch, he could imprison anyone's soul. Even Egyptian children were frightened by their parents with the threat, if you don't behave, the pharaoh will take a picture and keep your soul in the black stone forever. In an ancient society where the soul and the afterlife were more important than life itself, this fear was more terrifying than any punishment. 4. Voice recording, the immortal voice. The pharaoh knew a tactic more dangerous than any sword: sowing a seed of invisible paranoia. He secretly recorded his own voice on the phone and had it played back during trials when he was not present. Officials, soldiers, and even the priests were unnerved to hear the pharaoh's voice echo, even though he was elsewhere. To them, only a deity could be present in multiple places at once. From then on, the pharaoh's immortal voice became a source of terror. No one dared to speak ill of him or betray him, believing that the pharaoh could hear them no matter where they were. 5. Music and ringtones, the hymns of the gods during festivals. As the procession passed through the square, the pharaoh would press a button. The phone would play music-strange, resonant melodies, entirely different from Egyptian drums and flutes. The people were stunned into silence, then cheered in unison. The music of the gods, music from the heavens. A phone ringtone, something we consider ordinary, became the hymn of the universe in the eyes of the ancients. From then on, every piece of music that came from the phone was considered a blessing. A message from Ra 6. Charging the battery. The ritual of revival. A phone cannot run forever. Whenever the battery was low, the pharaoh was not worried. On the contrary, he turned it into an opportunity to strengthen his power. He would announce, "Ra is testing us. Bring offerings so I may perform the ritual to revive the sacred flame." While the people offered gold, livestock, and incense, the pharaoh secretly plugged the phone in to charge using methods we are familiar with, but which to the ancients was a sacred ritual. The next day, when the phone lit up again, the entire empire cheered. Ra has blessed the pharaoh. The eternal flame lives again. 7. The absolute power of superstition. Thanks to these miracles, the Pharaoh was not just a king, but a living god on earth. No one dared to doubt him. No one had the strength to resist. Every ordinary function, alarm, flashlight, camera, voice recorder became a weapon to rule over millions of people. And the fact that it was all a deception made that power even more frightening. The Pharaoh knew well, people fear the wrath of the gods more than the sword. And the phone had helped him sow that fear into every corner of ancient Egypt. But can power built on such a fragile secret last forever? What would happen if someone else accidentally discovered the truth? Egyptian society upended by magic. Ever since the voice of Ra appeared, Egypt was no longer the same. Whereas before, the Pharaoh's power came from his army and religious devotion, now, a single small object in his hand was enough to command the obedience of millions. And that power was not confined to the palace or the temple steps. It spread to the battlefields, reached every home, and crept into every folktale passed down through generations. On the brutal battlefield at the border with the Hittites, Egyptian soldiers were used to waiting for messengers on horseback or sailboats to bring orders from the Pharaoh. But now, everything had changed. During a crucial battle, the Egyptian general was hesitating between two lines of attack. Just then, the Pharaoh's phone rang. He pressed the object to his ear, nodded, and immediately issued a command: advance to the north. What no one could understand was that only a few minutes later, scouts reported back. The north was indeed the enemy's weakest point. The soldiers roared with approval, believing that the Pharaoh could hear the guidance of the god Ra right there on the battlefield. The truth was simple. A reconnaissance general had called from a distance to report in. But for the tens of thousands of soldiers, the fact that the Pharaoh received commands from the heavens and was always correct made their faith in him absolute. From then on, the Egyptian army became mightier than ever. They fought not just for their country, but in the belief that they were following the direct mandate of the gods. One of the things that astonished the populace most was the Pharaoh's ability to recreate images. During a ceremony, the Pharaoh held up the phone and showed the people a short video clip. Images of the victorious Egyptian army, flags waving, prisoners kneeling. The crowd was stunned into silence. To them, this was not simply replaying an event. They believed the Pharaoh had summoned moments from the past, making them live again right before their eyes. And if he could call back the past, surely the Pharaoh could also see the future. The priests immediately capitalized on this, proclaiming, "The Pharaoh possesses the power of prophecy. He foresees every victory, every defeat. To oppose him is to oppose fate itself." And so, each short video clip became a deified prophecy, plunging Egypt deeper into blind faith. The phone was not just a weapon on the battlefield. It became the very center of religion. Whenever the battery was low, the Pharaoh never showed concern. Instead, he turned it into a grand ritual. The people were summoned to the temple to kneel, pray, and offer gold, silver, incense, cattle, and goats. Meanwhile, behind a thick curtain, the Pharaoh secretly charged the battery. The next day, when the phone shone brightly again, the Pharaoh would appear, hold it high, and declare, "Ra has revived the eternal flame. You have been blessed." Cheers erupted. The belief that their own sacrifices had caused Ra to grant power to the Pharaoh only deepened the people's devotion and loyalty. Religion, already a tool of power in Egypt, now became even more formidable when tied to an object that no one could explain. In the villages, the people began to whisper tales of terrifying miracles. The camera. With just one picture, the Pharaoh could imprison your soul forever. Voice recording. The Pharaoh could hear you whisper even when he was not there. The ringtone. Each time the strange sound was heard, it meant, "Ra is calling down." Mischievous children were scared by their parents. If you don't behave, the Pharaoh will call Ra to take your soul. Merchants whispered that thanks to the glowing stone, the Pharaoh knew about every fraudulent transaction. And slaves believed that if the Pharaoh recorded their voices, he could force them to work even in the afterlife. The entire Egyptian society was caught in a web of belief and fear, woven from the simple functions of a telephone. And it was this superstition that kept the Pharaoh's power as solid as the pyramids. The priests, who had long been the class connecting humanity with the divine, now became the interpreters for the phone. They were the ones who built the legends, weaving more divinity into each function. The flashlight was not just a light, but the second eye of Ra. The voice recording was not just a voice, but the immortal breath. A video was not just an image, but a window into eternity. Thanks to this, the people believed not only in the Pharaoh, but in the entire religious system that backed him. It was a perfect circle. Technology nurtured theocracy, and theocracy protected the technology. In just a few years, Egypt was changed to its very roots. Soldiers fought more fiercely, believing in prophecy. The people sacrificed more, believing they were sustaining divine power. Officials were more loyal, fearing their souls would be imprisoned. But this change was not progress. It was a society controlled by an illusion where every political, military, and religious decision revolved around a small object that no one truly understood. The Pharaoh knew it well. This power was absolute, but also fragile, because it was all based on a single secret. The phone was just an ordinary tool, not a miracle. The question arose, what if one day this secret was exposed? What would happen if someone else touched the divine stone and discovered the truth? When the secret threatened to shatter, for years Egypt basked in the glory of Ra's miracle. The people believed, the officials obeyed, the army was fanatical. But like any illusion, it only needed a small crack to shatter. And that crack began with a seemingly harmless incident. In the palace at Memphis, a young slave was tasked with cleaning the chamber where the Pharaoh rested. One sweltering afternoon, while the Pharaoh was out attending a ceremony, the slave happened to see the glowing stone left on a table. His heart pounded. Though he knew that merely touching the sacred object would mean his soul would be cursed, his curiosity was stronger than his fear. A trembling hand reached out, a light touch, and the phone screen lit up. He snatched his hand back in terror, but then he saw his own face reflected on the glossy surface. It was only the front-facing camera, but in the slave's eyes, this wasn't a divine punishment, but a strange mechanism that could instantly reproduce his face. He was stunned. Maybe this object wasn't entirely magic? It wasn't just curious slaves. Egypt's enemies had also begun to take notice. The Hittites, after numerous defeats against the Pharaoh's prophecies, sent a spy to infiltrate Thebes. One night, the spy succeeded in breaking into the temple where the Pharaoh kept the phone during the revival ritual. In his haste, he accidentally pressed the power button. The phone flashed, displaying a startup logo. No gods appeared. Only light and a strange symbol. The spy understood. This was not magic, but a controllable machine. He intended to bring this secret back, but he was caught by the guards before he could escape the city. Before his execution, he screamed in the middle of the square, "The Pharaoh is deceiving you. This stone is just an object with buttons, not a god." The people were stunned. But before they could discuss it, the priest declared, "He is a blasphemer who dares to insult Ra. Burn him alive." The Hittite was killed on the spot. His final words were buried under the cheers and the flames, but like a dagger, they had planted the seeds of doubt in the hearts of some. From that day on, rumors rippled through Egypt. Did the Pharaoh really receive commands from Ra, or just from the talking object? If a mere touch could make it light up, could an ordinary person perform the miracle? Could this all be one great deception? The priests worked tirelessly to refute the rumors, organizing more elaborate ceremonies, turning each battery charge into a magnificent festival. But the more they did, the more the suspicion grew. People started to notice that every time Ra tested them, the phone would disappear behind a curtain for many hours. The Pharaoh, being a wise man, understood the danger. He knew that if the truth were revealed, his power would crumble in an instant. There was no god Rhea behind him, only a phone. At night, he would sit alone in a dark room, staring at the screen's faint glow. He remembered the day he first found it, a gift fallen from the sky or a cruel twist of fate. It had helped him dominate an empire, but it had also become the shackle that bound him to an endless lie. He asked himself, if one day I can no longer charge it, will this divine authority vanish like desert sand? To protect the secret, the Pharaoh gave an order. Anyone who had ever touched or doubted the sacred relic had to disappear. A series of slaves, guards, and even some priests were executed in silence. So much blood was shed that even the queens and princesses whispered in fear. Was the miracle really that fragile? But the more he suppressed, the more doubt the Pharaoh sowed. The Egyptian empire was now ruled not just by the fear of the gods, but by the fear of disappearing for knowing too much. On the battlefield, soldiers began to ask each other, without the glowing stone, can the Pharaoh still hear Re? In the villages, the people whispered, if I got it and pressed the button, could I become Pharaoh? In the palace, officials began to quietly plot. If the truth came out, the throne would be shaken. All of Egypt was like a giant pyramid built of sand, majestic on the outside, but a single gust of wind could bring it all crashing down. 7. The unanswered question. The Pharaoh continued to protect his secret with all his might, turning the phone into an untouchable holy object. But the truth, once its seed is planted, can never be buried forever. Where would ancient Egypt go from here? Would the Pharaoh maintain his absolute power, or would he be betrayed by his own miracle? That is a question left unanswered, a reminder that every great deception has its day of reckoning. The story of the Pharaoh and the divine phone ends in a strange paradox. A great civilization built not only on colossal stones, but also on a fragile lie. In the eyes of the people, the Pharaoh was the son of Re, a man who could summon light, trap souls, and hear the voice of a god. But in the shadows, only one man knew the truth. He was not the incarnation of a deity, but merely the accidental owner of a tool far beyond his era's comprehension. The phone, just an ordinary modern device, became the ultimate weapon in the Pharaoh's hands, not because it had destructive power, but because it preyed upon the most primitive beliefs of humanity. A flashlight became the flame of a god. An alarm became a call from the heavens. A camera became a soul trap. The power was not in the device itself, but in how it was interpreted by people. But for that very reason, the power was extremely fragile. Once someone knew the truth, that the sacred relic operated with buttons and finite energy, the entire system of theocracy would collapse. The Pharaoh knew it well. He did not rule by magic, but by endless pretense. And like all lies, it was destined to one day be exposed. If we look back from the modern world, this story offers a lesson. Technology, no matter how advanced, can become a tool of deceit if shrouded in divinity. Blind faith can turn the ordinary into the miraculous, but when the truth shatters, the consequences are dire. Power based on a technological secret can help one person dominate, but it can also bury an entire civilization. So if you were an ancient Egyptian, witnessing the Pharaoh hold the phone high, its light flashing in the darkness, would you believe it was a miracle, or would you dare to doubt? And if one day that divine object ran out of battery and no longer lit up, would you dare to say the gods had fallen silent? Or would you continue to believe, because sometimes the truth is more terrifying than faith? The story closes here, but the mystery remains. Was the magic real, or just a tool? Was the power eternal, or just a lie concealed by a brilliant light? But is that truly the whole story?